Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar entitled Power Up Your School Performance. It's one of our Chem Showcase webinars. My name is John Bunyan. I'm a Business Development Manager here at Chem. I'm joined by my colleague, David Martin, who's our Training and Onboarding Manager. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. You're all in listen-only mode, so that you're all automatically muted. If you could ask any questions that you might have in the questions box that you should be able to see on your screen, and we'll either get to them through the course of the webinar, or I'll save them for some Q&A at the end with myself and David. Anything obviously of a sensitive or personal nature we'll pick up offline, and we'll take up that individually later on. But without further ado, we're going to carry on with the webinar. So, as I said, my name is John Bunyan. I'm the Business Development Manager here at Chem. For those of you who perhaps don't know about Chem, and I know it might be a bit unusual, but a bit of background for us that you may or may not be aware. We've been working with schools for over 30 years now, probably close to 35 years, and in that time, we've developed a customer base well over 100 countries now, and we use our tests with around about 500,000 students every single year. The history of Chem it goes back many years and was born out of research, and for that we were known for an evidence-based approach to these formative assessments that we've got in schools. And because of that, we work with a lot of schools, obviously, but we also work right the way through school groups as well. We used to be part of Durham University, and a lot of you may remember us from our Durham days, but we are now part of Cambridge. We joined Cambridge back in 2019 as part of a joint venture between Cambridge Assessment and the University Press. So we are firmly a part of Cambridge, been there almost 3 years now. In that time, we've kept broadly the same product suite that you may be aware of. Now, our baseline assessments, and this is quite an interesting piece in terms of where we sit as part of the Cambridge family. And obviously, many of you might know Cambridge from the University Press in the educational resources throughout the course of that journey. And some of you may be more familiar with the pathway itself in terms of the qualifications at the end of it. Chem, or the Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring, is very much sits at the start of that journey. If you can imagine, often at the start of an academic journey, any journey where there might be especially a gap or inconsistency in the data that's coming with the students into the school, in the school environment. And we all know that each student at their different stages of education have very different needs, and there's very different precursors to what the student, or what's going to indicate and inform future success for the students at each of those stages. So consequently, we've developed a portfolio of assessments over those years, and we've got assessments right the way from nursery, so children as young as 3 years old, where we're sitting the tests one-on-one with teachers and teaching assistants, right the way through to our post-16 study, where we actually start to predict to A-level outcomes as well. Now you can see here, so we've got aspects right the way from nursery, base at reception. INCUS covers the whole of the primary years and often provides that longitudinal outlook at primary level that's really useful. By the time we reach mid-years at lower secondary, there you can see we start to predict to GCSE outcomes, and Yellis takes that one next step further from years 10 and 11, right the way through to Alice, obviously for the A-levels, as I've said. Now, just to give us a little bit of an idea about yourselves, if you wouldn't mind, in the questions box, and you can pick any one or all of some of the questions that we've got, but it would be really useful for myself and David to understand a little bit about more about your experience with baseline assessments. If you've got any experience with baseline assessments, it's going to help us tailor and develop and evolve the webinar as we go through. So, as I said before, baseline assessment, it's that snapshot of students' skills and abilities at that single moment in time, often at the start of a journey. So, questions for yourself. Does your school use baseline data? Do you use it at all? Do you use an in-house solution, or perhaps do you use a third-party provider? Which data do you use? Which data do you find most useful throughout the course of your schools? And what challenges do you find presented by that data? What comes out? Are there any recurring themes? Are there any issues that you perhaps continue to come up against? Challenges that you'd like to be able to overcome? So I'm just going to give you a little bit of time, if you wouldn't mind, pop some of those responses into our questions box. Hopefully we can come to those in good time, but either way it's going to help David and myself evolve and develop the webinar as we go forward. So I can see some there. Yeah, we've got some questions coming through, some responses already. So like I say, in the questions box, there's I do appreciate this is very much a can of worms for a lot of schools, and we still do find some schools don't use a third party or independent measure at all. Often schools keep it in-house to begin with, and then use to look for an independent and objective measure a little bit further down that line, that journey of adoption or learning. It's interesting as well, I think, when we look across the world, when we do find a number of consistencies right the way from the UK around the world as well. So as I said, we work in well over 100 countries now, and there's some consistent themes in terms of that data use, and also in terms of the level of adoption and the kinds of adoption that we see over the course of this time. You do find, because of this, it's that independent and objective measure that I'm going to come on to a little bit more. Yeah, I can see some absolutely fantastic questions coming through there. Thank you very much. Please do keep putting them into the questions. We will address any and all as we're going through. Like I said, anything sensitive we'll pick up offline, and if you've got any specific queries about your data, your use of the assessments, we can do that separately. Okay, so following on a little bit from myself, so some of the benefits of Chem, if you are not familiar with Chem perhaps, or not familiar with outsourcing this sort of assessment, one of the primary benefits I think that a lot of schools will find is the objectivity and the fact that it is an independent measure, and this is something that's quite consistent, something you can use to benchmark across the school, but also benchmark and put the school itself in context of where it might be. Okay, we're completely non-paper based now, so 100% digital. There are no papers, so everything's digital. It's all online. We've got some offline versions available, but once again, they're delivered digitally. I know this is always a hot topic as well, but no teacher marking. You've got your student details into the assessment, and we do the rest of the heavy lifting once the students have completed the assessment. Because of this, it is really fast and flexible. Now, most of the assessments that you've seen there, you can deliver in less than an hour, so you can fit them into a single period of study, and you can get the data. The data will come back to you 24 hours maximum. Often, it will come through in a matter of minutes, so you can actually start getting some really actionable data straight away. And we do cater for all ability levels, so right away from the less able to the gifted and talented. And we do that by the nature of the assessments themselves, and that nature is adaptive, which may differ slightly from a traditional test that you might be familiar with, where all students will see the same questions. Adaptive tests, the questions that the students presented with are dependent on the answers that they give. So if a student's getting questions correct, then those questions are going to get progressively harder. If they're getting them wrong, it's going to get progressively easier, but my colleague David will go through an example of that a little bit later on. But you might ask, why adaptive? So why do we want to do adaptive? Well, research has shown that actually adaptive tests can get to an accurate measure of a student's ability much quicker than a static test, and so consequently it's a lot quicker, as I said, to deliver, often inside of a single lesson. So because of this, means you can actually start using that feedback straight away. You get especially aids transition, especially at the start of a particular key stage or any key milestone that you might have within the school. You can actually get the data and you can actually deliver it really quickly as well. Now, consequently, it's then technically more accurate. If you're doing it in a shorter period of time, you can fit more questions in. If you can fit more questions in, you're going to get a more accurate measure. And over the course of our assessments, we've got tens of thousands of items, tens of thousands of questions within that question bank with which to present the students with. Now, because of this, it's going to allow us to cater for all those ability levels. So we're not going to ask a less able student overly difficult questions, and we're not asking a gifted and talented student overly simple questions. We're actually trying to target that level of ability really, really quickly. And the algorithm behind the assessment is really very clever when it comes to actually allocating and suggesting those questions for the student. Now, because of this, because that targeting is so effective and so quick, it means we can actually get to that really effective, really, really accurate measure very, very quickly. Also, because of that, it's a very personalized experience for learners as well. So, and obviously every student's got a huge, every cohort you will have a big wide range of abilities right the way through, from the less able to the gifted and talented. So we know that a one-size-fits-all approach has its disadvantages, especially when it comes down to assessment. And this is why we want to use our adaptive tests to tailor each and every experience to the student. And because the student will feel more engaged with that process, it means that potentially any attention deficit that you might have would be mitigated. You're asking the student to concentrate for shorter periods of time. And also because you've got a number of questions that, or a number of scenarios that the students will see, they're all going to have a very different experience. It means that test security is improved as well. So the opportunity for a student to leave the test and then share actionable insight about the content of the test to other students, either that year or in years beyond, is heavily mitigated. So you can be pretty confident that whatever experience a student's going to have, the next student's going to have a different one. This means that also you can schedule much more flexibly over a course of days, weeks, or even across the whole half term if needed too, especially if you've got stragglers joining partway through the year. Now, why do we want to do all this? Why do we go to all this time and effort to create these assessments? Well, we want what you want. We want the best possible outcome for all of the students that you've got. We want you to be able to maximize the outcome. I used to teach myself, and I know for a fact I was always struggling for time. You always think, if I just had more time, and this isn't about giving you more time, but it's certainly about shortcutting some of the processes that you might have had, about giving you an insight into what you've actually got in front of you very, very quickly. Often, especially when you've got a new cohort coming through or a new class of students in front of you, you really want to get a handle on the levels of ability that you've got in front of you as quickly as possible, so you can start working with them. So because of this, we want to understand individual student strengths and weaknesses. So we want to understand that ability profile. So where the verbal might be strong, where it might be weak, which students are very numerous, which ones are much more able from a non-verbal capacity. This allows you to inform a number of different class and individual needs, whether that be everything from differentiated interventions within the classroom, group work within the classroom, seating plans even to the point of putting on booster sessions for particular students. You might be able to inform a lot of this and start allocating resources to those kinds of interventions much, much faster. Now, obviously, we want to use the data. We want some objective data to set some targets as well, and that's absolutely what you can do with the data. But that is really just scratching the surface, because it helps you then start to evidence these points of development and ultimately be able to talk to the students themselves, but also their parents, in a very informed way, that's going to help you create that objective measure, to create that independence. It's not just observational data, it's not just the school saying it. We have an independent third party that is actually supporting our assessment, and this is what we're going to do with that information. So because of all of this, you obviously want to know a bit more about the assessments and how you can use it. So I think it's at this point I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to hand over to my colleague David, and David's going to take you for the remainder of the presentation. So if you wouldn't mind handing over.
Thanks, John. So hello, everybody. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Can John, if you wouldn't mind just confirming that you can see my screen okay?
I'm seeing a blank screen, David, a black one.
Okay.
I'm not sure if our admin's got anything else.
How are we doing now?
That's working for me, David.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Kate. So yes, so I'm going to talk to you all about the MIDGES and YELIS assessments. This is the age range that we're actually talking about in this webinar itself. So baseline assessments, as John has just actually said. And there we go. I'm just trying to move things away from my screen here, so bear with me a second. So yeah, adaptive baseline tests, they're going to help schools understand their student needs, maybe where they maybe need that little bit of additional support as well. A big thing as well about pre and post 16 assessments is that we can now predict to high stakes subject exams. So we can do that from pre-16 to GCSE, GCSE, and A-level when we get to post-16 as well. So these tests are standardized. All the students should have the same experience when they actually sit down to do the tests. There's no teacher intervention, and the teachers will be in the room when the students are doing the test, but they'll just be, wandering around, making sure that everybody's happy. Nobody doesn't actually understand what they're meant to be doing. And again, as John mentioned, they are inclusive for all. We have standard time versions, but we also have additional time versions that give 25% more time. Okay, so if you have any students who maybe have speed of processing issues, they can do the extra time version. Basically, any students who would get additional time for any other kind of task they might do within school, they can do the extra time version of this. So we have the secondary assessments, MIDGES, which is for ages 11 to 14, so UK cohorts 7, 8 and 9. We then go into YELIS for age range 14 to 16, UK cohorts 10 and 11. So 55 minutes of testing time on average for MIDGES. That's in the standard time version. YELIS is not quite as long. You're looking at about 45 minutes on average. But remember that 25% extra time version is available. So it is a single assessment. It includes adaptive but also non-adaptive sections. It is designed to give you an overall measure of the developability of a student. There isn't any sound as well, so the students do get instructions at the start of each section. The instructions basically tell them exactly how we need them to answer the questions. They get a couple of example questions as well. And then once those example questions are finished, the real section will start. They do get told as well at the start of the section how long that particular section will last. So, vocabulary, 10 minutes for the vocabulary in the standard time version, 25 minutes for the standard time maths, and so on. So it is a low stakes computer adaptive assessment. Low stakes is quite important. The results are not going to follow the students through the rest of their lives. It is really designed to give teachers information about how their students have performed in the test, where they maybe need that little bit of additional support. And again, as John mentioned, these tests are adaptive. That is the big plus, the big benefit as well of being a computer-based tests. They do allow themselves to then be able to adapt to the answers that the students give. So the starting question you will see if you're a Year 7 Midget student, you will see an average difficulty question for a Year 7 student. Subsequent questions are going to be dependent on the answers that you give. So as long as you're getting questions right, the questions will increase in difficulty. But the reverse is also true. If we start to get questions wrong, then the questions will get easier. It will allow students to show you exactly what they can do. Okay, so the years that I've been at Chem, talked to lots of schools over the years, it's always interesting when we have teachers telling us that they were not particularly, a student surprised them with how good they were at a certain kind of question. That's always really good to hear, because it shows the students have been engaged when they've been doing the tests. It's been something different, maybe. Might have been asked to do things that they've not really seen before. And it's a really good way to be able to determine just how the students have done. With them doing this on their own, you know, they're just going through the test itself without having to, you know, volunteer any answers in class. Some students might not always be the first ones to do that. And it's always really good that those students will be, you know, able to show you exactly what they can do when they're doing the test itself. So just to visually explain how the assessments adapt. So imagine this could be a typical student's path through the test itself. So my first question, as we can see, it's going to be an average difficulty question for whatever year group I might be in. So imagine we get this question right. The questions will now start and react to the answers that are being provided. Get questions right, and we will move further along that difficulty line. So imagine this is me doing the test, and we're doing pretty good. We're getting questions right as we go through, until we hit a point where maybe we get a question wrong. Now, we're not going to be overly concerned at this stage. We're not going to make a big jump either way. Going to pitch the next question roughly the same difficulty level as that first wrong answer. But if we do start to see wrong answers, then okay, we might be thinking, yep, maybe we are reaching up the upper difficulty level that this particular student is capable of answering. But again, we're not going to jump too far back. Pitch the next question just a little bit easier than the last correct answer they gave. We get that one right, then remember the process will start again until we start to see more consistent wrong answers, and that's where we would have the ability of the student worked out. So we do need the students to have attempted enough questions. You know, if you think if we only answered 4 or 5 questions within a section, you're not really given the program, the algorithms that are working in the background. They don't really have enough data to be able to come to a informed conclusion about what the ability of that student might be. So usually about a dozen questions, you know, 14, 15, 16 questions, that's given the test enough data to actually work with. So midgets and yellows, let's have a look at the sections that the test actually includes. So single test, as we said earlier. Both midgets and yellows include an adaptive vocabulary section. They also both have the adaptive maths. We then go into the non-adaptive section, so all students will see the same questions from this point onwards. So with midgets, we have skills, which includes proofreading, and we've got speed and accuracy in there as well. Now, I do have examples of these coming up. Midgets also includes a non-verbal, which has cross-section questions, it has block counting, and it has pictures. The yellows Year 10 and 11 assessment includes adaptive vocab, adaptive maths, and patterns, non-adaptive patterns, which includes matching, reflections, rotations, things like that. So the reasons why the assessments include these sections: vocabulary is an important feature to enable us to predict most subjects. It's an important element of most subjects, English, history, and so on. It can be the most culturally linked. So you might find if you have EAL students, they maybe don't get a particularly high vocab score, but they will have other chances within the test to demonstrate their actual ability. For maths, again, maths correlates well with most subjects. The section is designed with speed and fluency in mind rather than purely mathematical knowledge. But again, it is a good predictor of final achievement. The skills, if you think about the kind of things that are within the skills, proofreading is almost a bit of a dying art. You know, the need to be able to spell is maybe not quite as vital as it was because of the way technology is advancing. Everything has a spell check these days. It's quite difficult to include an incorrectly spelled word within a document itself because it's always going to try and sort of put it right for you. But this has given us an idea as to whether the students can actually spot the mistakes in a passage of text. The speed and accuracy, working quickly out if that's a skill that a student maybe doesn't have, how are they going to perform when they go to final exams where they do have to work quickly in order to trying to get as many marks as possible within the exam itself, but they also have to work accurately as well. Okay, no point working quickly if you can't be accurate as well. So that's what we're looking for with the skills. With the non-verbal, good measure of ability in 3D visualizations, spatial aptitude, pattern recognition, things like that. Patterns is looking at similar things as well. Visualizations, pattern recognition, some spatial aptitude in there as well. Another important feature of these non-adaptive sections is that the students will see how long they've got left. In the vocab and math sections, the students are told how long they have for the section. So 10 minutes standard time for the vocab, 25 minutes standard time for the maths, but they will not see those 25 minutes. They will not see the clock ticking while they're doing the maths section, but they do in the non-adaptive section. So the skills, the proofreading, for example, you have a passage of text. You've got to try and find as many mistakes as possible within that passage of text, and you have a minute to find as many as you can, and you will see that minute ticking away. It'll be in the bottom middle of the screen. So that is, I think, a really important thing to be aware of, you know, because that's going to give you an idea as to maybe how well the students have coped with that kind of pressure, that kind of time pressure. It doesn't matter how many times I do the sections of these tests, when I'm doing the non-adaptive sections, you can't help but look at that time ticking by. So yeah, so it is always an interesting feature that I always make sure whenever I'm talking to schools about data, I will remind them that that's what the students will have seen when they were doing the skills, when they were doing the non-verbal sections. So let's have a look at a few example questions. We are in a few minutes going to have a look at an actual section itself. I'm going to show you some questions within the adaptive maths section. But to begin with, let's just have a little look at what some of the other section questions will look like. So vocabulary, remember there's no sound here. So we get example questions. We have to get the example questions right, but if we get them wrong, the system will actually tell us what the right answer is. So nobody will be sat there not being able to progress because they don't know the answer to the example question. The example question is just to make sure the student knows what they have to do to answer the questions. It's not going to be a taster for how difficult the questions might get. So we have a target. It could be a picture, like we can see here. It could be a word or it could be a phrase. We've got answer options down the right-hand side, and we simply choose the one that we think is closest in meaning to our target word. So there's a phrase. To leave, which one of those 4 options is the closest in meaning to that target phrase? We just select it and move on to the next question. The maths, we have a bit of a mixture of questions within maths. Some of them will be multiple choice. Others will be typing your answer into an answer box. So there's one where we would have to enter the answer into the box that we can see there. And here we have a multiple choice question here. So again, x equals 2, which one of those lines that are on that graph would be the correct answer to the question that we can see there. So remember, these assessments are all curriculum free. So they're not linked to any particular curriculum. The vocab and math sections, these are the sections that will be adapting to the answers that the students give. From this point onwards, once we finish the maths, all students will see the same kind of questions, but maybe not at the same time, because some students might finish the maths questions within the allowed 25 minutes. The majority won't, but that is on purpose. That's the sections are designed to time out before the average student would actually reach all possible questions. So for midgets, we move into the skills section. So we're looking for spelling mistakes, we're looking for grammar mistakes. We've got the passage of text we can see there, and we simply highlight where we think the mistakes are. Speed and accuracy, again, we've got our target. It could be characters, it could be numbers, it could be symbols. We have 4 possible matches, and we have to choose the one we think is the correct match. So we have about 2 minutes to do roughly 26 of these. So, you know, we're looking for working quickly, but remember accuracy as well. Still in the midgets test, we've got the nonverbal. We have cross sections. So we have a target cross section. And then we have 4 possible shapes. That could be a cross section of one of those shapes. If it is, we choose the one we think it is. If we don't think it is a cross section of one of those shapes, then we do have the no match option. The real section will include a lot more shapes than just those 4 that we can see in that example question there. The block counting. So we have a series of shapes that are made up of small blocks and large blocks. We are told this is a small block, this is a large block. We could be asking you simply how many small blocks can you see in that picture. We could also be asking you how many small blocks could have been used to make that same shape. It's that big block, you could make that same shape using 3 small blocks instead of that 1 large block. So if we were looking for how many small blocks could have been used to make that picture, it would be 5. And as we're going through this, we don't always show both angle views as well. We might be asking you to visualize what could be happening around the back of a shape. Say we cannot actually see it, but we might be asking you to try and visualize what might be happening in a different angle view of that shape, even though we can't actually see it. And then the final section within midgets is the pictures. So this example is an adding pictures example. So if we were to add the left-hand picture to the right, which of those 4 answer options would we end up with? There's subtracting pictures and sequence pictures within that section as well. So moving on to Yellis, remember we've got adaptive vocab and maths before we reach the patterns. So again, the patterns is fixed. Everybody will see the same. We have some matching. So we've got our target checkerboard here. Which one of those 4 answer options is the match? We've got reflecting pictures. So if we imagine a shape pass through a mirror, what would the reflection be? And rotations, the rotation angle will always be 90 degrees, but the shape will not be the same all the way through. But all we want to do is, in the example question, we've got an arrow. If we were to rotate that through 90 degrees, which of those 4 answer options would be the final resting position of that particular shape? So we've had a look at the kind of sections that are actually within the test itself, but let's just have a quick look at one of the sections. So I'm going to try not to embarrass myself, and we're going to have a little look at the maths section here. So here we go. Now what the test does, and that's why I can jump straight into the maths section here, it is saving your responses as you go through it. So it's a really useful feature. It does allow, you know, if something goes wrong halfway through a test, it will know that there's a partial test that exists for a student, so they wouldn't have to do the complete test again. The system would recognize that we have a partial test, and it would give you the option to then pick it up from the start of the section where, you know, something maybe happened. So it is a, you know, fingers crossed that won't happen, but it's really good to have that option if it does. And that allows me to jump into various sections of the test as well for when we're doing things like this. So this is the math section. So if I click next, here's my first example question. So 5 plus 1. If I think 5 plus 1 is 7, let's see what happens. So I put 7 in the answer box. It's not happy. It tells me that's not right, but it does tell me what the answer is. Okay, so I don't have an excuse to not move on because the test has actually told me what the answer is. It's only going to do that in the example questions. So 2 chocolate bars from a pack of 10. What is the percentage? So we'll get this one right. 20%, I reckon that is. So we click next. Yep, that's good. And then we've got one final example question. So we have this one, we've got a multiple choice instead of just putting answers into an answer box. So 3 plus y equals 5. We've got 5 possible answers. So let's get it right. 3 plus 2, I'm going to say, equals 5. Yep, that's good. So now we find out how long we've got. So 25 minutes in the standard time version of the assessment. We can't go back because this is an adaptive section, so the only way is forwards. So let's just have a go at a few questions just for a minute or so, and then we'll see. 15 minutes to cycle 5 miles. How many miles will he cycle in 1 hour? Okay, so this one's reasonably okay, I'm thinking. So I think that will be 20 miles. But look, it's not going to tell me. I think that's right, but it's not going to tell me whether I've actually got it right or wrong. Okay, it only does that in the example questions. Okay. Now we are quickly reaching questions where, when I'm doing a demo like this, I am going to struggle a little bit here. So I'm just going to randomly guess a few answers. So, you know, please bear with me while I just guess a few. While we're going through. So there we go. Square of x. So I think that would be that one. 3y equals 6. What is the value of y? I'm going to say 2. 20 students in a class, 40% are vegetarian. How many students are vegetarian? So let's have a little think about this, or do I just randomly guess? But I tell you what, rather than me try and guess my way through these, given time, I promise you I would know the answer. But moving through, the pressure is on when I'm doing demos like this. So let's just skip a question, which again, the students can do if they don't know the answer. They can just move on to the next question. The more questions you see, maybe the more chances you have to get a few more right. With maths as well, you are allowed workout paper. So, you know, a bit of rough paper is absolutely fine. In fact, you would need it when you're doing questions like this. I certainly would need it if I was going to try and do a question like that. So yeah, rough workout paper might make some of the questions that you have here a little bit easier to try and work out, rather than just trying to do it in your head the way that I'm trying to do it at the moment. So let's go through again so we can see the kind of questions that we're getting. Read the instructions, make sure that we know what we're being asked to do, and then, as we said, we just choose which answers we think are the correct ones. So before I go on any further and just show you exactly how not particularly good at maths I am, let's just jump back to the presentation, and then we'll have a look at some of the reports that you actually receive. So we've had a quick look at that maths section demonstration. Now let's have a look at using the data, and I'm going to talk about 4 key reports. And before we do that, we'll just quickly tell you all of the reports that you would actually have available. So we have the standardized scores. That's going to allow you to look at your student data compared to others who have taken that same test. Does allow you to categorize data, you know, whether you have an average scoring student, maybe slightly better than average, slightly below average. We've got the visual attainment profiles that are using the same data that is in the table of standardized scores, but presenting it as a more visual report. We have the latest, which is a report for parents and carers. We'll talk more about that in a second, because that's one I'm going to show you. We've got the cohort profiles, so being able to look at the group rather than just an individual. You know, that again can be really useful to know whether all of my current year 7 maybe are not doing as well in maths. We have predictions and chances. So we can predict 2 high-stakes subject exams, and that's all about looking at the average subject performance of students in the past who have also taken a Chem baseline. But again, we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And value added, that's looking ahead into the future. If we can predict a student subject result and the school return the actual achieved subject result for the same student, we will be able to give you value added. Did the student achieve the grade we thought they would? Did they do a little bit better? Or maybe did they not do as well? Okay, so that is looking ahead into the future a little bit, but it is something that if you do return achieved exam results for students who have taken a Chem baseline, then we will be able to give you value added. So the first report I was going to talk to you about is it's the latest report that we actually have. It's a welcome report. We never used to have anything that could be shared with parents for pre-16. We do now. Given about what the MIDIUS test is, in this case, this is a MIDIUS example. You get the same for YELLIS. Tells you a little bit about what the test actually included. So you can see there, you've got a little bit of text explaining the vocabulary section, the math section, and so on. But the important bit is the individual students, a little bit of data about how the students scored in the actual test itself. And I do like this a lot. I think it's really good because it's not, I don't think it's trying to be trying to give too much information which, you know, for parents maybe they wouldn't need anyway, just having an idea whether we have that working towards expectation, whether we're in line with, you know, we're actually where we would hope the student would be, or whether they're maybe a little bit below expectation. That's a really good categories, I think, to use in order to give parents an idea as to how their particular son or daughter maybe has scored within the test itself. So this example student we can see here, in the non-verbal and in the skills, they were in line with expectations. So, you know, where we would think they would be compared to others. The vocabulary, they're a little bit higher expectations, so a little bit beyond where we thought they would be. For maths, it's a little bit the other way. They're slightly below expectations, so working towards where we would hope they would be. So quite a very new report, but I think quite an interesting and valuable report there as well. So I just wanted to quickly talk about standardized scores as well. They're a big part of pre-16 feedback. So without going too in depth with this, just want to really give you an idea as to how we work out standardized scores. So we use something called the normal distribution, which you can see there. All of our midges data will be, all of our midges or yellows data would be below that curve. We have that mean score of 100, and then we have a standard deviation of 15. That allows us basically to categorize our results. So if you imagine that steps of 15 either side of that mean line to begin with, that's going to be where the majority of my scores will fall. So there's my average scorers, but as we said, some students will be slightly above or slightly below average. If we take another 15 step, we will capture those students. And you can see we've got a little bit left either side. So a final 15 step would capture my well above or my well below average students. So that's the grid, if you like, to have in mind whenever schools are looking at their standardized scores table. If they have that grid of scores, they will be able to determine whether their students have performed average, maybe slightly better, or even well above. So if we look at an example table here, so we do break the scores down. We do have an overall score. So this is going to allow us to identify inconsistent section results. Whenever I'm looking at data, that's what I'm looking for. So I'm looking at the overall score. I tend to look at the overall score first. It is only going to use the results from vocabulary and maths because those are the adaptive sections. But again, being able to see the other sections is going to give me a more detailed profile about how the student has performed in the test itself. So if you imagine every one of those rows is an individual student, if we have our grid in mind here, we can start and maybe do something again. This is something that I do when I'm looking at data. So there's my well above average scores for that first student. We've got a slightly above average score as well in the skills, and then we have an average score in the nonverbal. So all of the sections of that test, it was maybe the nonverbal that the student did the least well in, say. Next student down, we can do the same thing. We've got 3 well above average section scores there, and we have 2 average scoring areas. Third student, again, we've got 2 well above average, 2 slightly above average, and 1 slightly below average in the nonverbal. Final student, 2 well above average, 2 within the average range, and then we've got 1 which is a well below average, below 70 skills score. So remember what the skills included: proofreading, speed and accuracy. So, you know, potentially there's a weakness that this particular student has, you can break the skills score down to look at the individual standardized scores that were achieved in the proofreading and the speed and accuracy. So that would certainly be something that I would be investigating for that particular student. Was it one thing or the other, or was it just a combination of both of the sections? But certainly highlighting to me a weakness that that student has in that particular section of the test that they have taken. The IPR, so the student ability profile. So imagine we have a scenario like this. So we've got 2 Year 10 students. They do actually have the same overall standardized score. So the question I would be asking myself, surely their ability profiles are going to look the same. They have the same overall score. So when I remove those boxes, it's going to show me the same thing, surely. Actually, not necessarily. Okay. Because the overall score is only using the results from the vocab and maths section, we could potentially see a difference like the one we can see there. One student with a much stronger maths ability than vocab, other student with a much stronger vocab ability than maths. But potentially, we're not aware of that. We might not be aware of that if we only provided the overall score. So a benefit there of being able to give standardized scores across all of the sections. So the final thing, the final piece of feedback that I was going to talk about is the predictions and chances. So it is looking at potential future exam performance of students. It's going to be based on the average final subject exam performance of students in the past who have taken that Chem test and also the corresponding final subject exam. We also provide chances graphs. Now, chances graphs will give you the percentage probability of the student achieving one of the possible outcomes that are available. Okay, every grade is available to you when you walk into that exam room. You might be more likely to achieve, one or the other grade, but certainly there's nothing to stop you achieving a different grade. The chances graphs are designed to give you an idea as to the percentage probability of a different grade being achieved. This example that we can see here, we do have, the largest bar is the most likely final grade that we think this particular student will achieve in this subject, but we can see similar baseline scoring students have achieved a higher grade in the past in that same subject. However, we do have students of that same baseline ability who have achieved a lower grade in the past. So predictions are just that, they're part of an overall chances scenario. And the final thing that I was going to mention before we finish, and I know we're getting very close to finish time here, was the latest thing that we actually have at Chem. It's coming soon. I don't think it's there just yet, but it is a well-being assessment. And I saw this for the first time this week in the last few days. It's been quite interesting to have a look at this. So it's going to be across the age ranges that we cover here at Chem. We're going to try and find out how students feel when they're at school by asking them questions like the one we can see here. When I am at school, I feel good about myself. You've got the options there. You choose which one you agree with, rather. And then when the students have been through that, the schools themselves will have reports available, individual reports, summary reports for the school, group reports, and so on. Those reports are along similar lines to the one we can see here. So this would be a group report, the group responses to the question, I feel bored. Okay, 45% of this example always felt bored, 29% often, 13% not often, 13% never. So this is just an example of the kind of things that you could potentially see from that well-being assessment. So quite a nice, interesting new sort of thing that we can offer here at Chem, and it will be available fairly soon, I think. I'm not quite sure exactly when, but it will be available soon. Okay, so that's as far as I was going to go. I'm just going to bring John back into the chat now, and also finish off with just giving you these web addresses. If you do want to find out a bit more, you might even want us to sign up for the tests. That's where you need to be. If you go to chem.org, the Chem homepage, that will sort of steer you to where you want to be. If you want to find out the prices, want to find out how to subscribe, you can just go to the Chem homepage and follow the menu options, and I'm sure you will find the one that you need. Just to bring John back in and see whether there's any questions, or if anybody does have any questions, feel free to jump in with any.
Thanks, David. I've been going through as many of the questions as I could as we've been going along. There's been some good ones. I've tried to cover them off. But if I scan back up the top for the moment, we had one. It was around the difference between Midgis and Yellis. So there was a school thinking of moving from they do Midgis year 7 and Midgis year 9, but thinking of moving the year 9 to Yellis year 10. I've answered the question in terms of the difference between the tests, but perhaps if you just give your feedback on that.
Yeah, that is quite a good question. It's something that we get asked fairly frequently, especially if you're if you baseline in year 7, you actually do that and want to use another Chem assessment later on, they would usually choose to do year 10 Yellis. Those, over the years and everything, they have been the most common cohorts that have been used, baseline in year 7, then again in year 10. Predictions are offered from both. Value added will be offered from both as well. Predictions from year 10, obviously the gap between doing the Yellis baseline in year 10 and the final subject exam at the end of year 11, it's shorter. Therefore, the prediction, I think, would be that bit more accurate, because you're not going to have to wait as long between doing the baseline and doing that final subject exam. You think about the distance, if you baseline at year 7, it's going to be 5 years before before the students actually take that high stakes subject exam. So, I would expect predictions naturally are going to be that bit more accurate the shorter the gap, if you like, between the baseline being taken and the final subjects exam being taken as well. But you will get predictions from both. You will get value added from both as well. So when the students take those final high stakes subject exams, you will get value added based on their Yellis prediction and also based on their Midgis year 7 prediction as well. So you're not missing out on anything if you did choose to move over from year 9 Midgis to year 10 Yellis.
Okay, thanks, David. And there's another one. I appreciate this is a really big one, and I'm going to pause. So I'm going to ask you for, I think, 3 top tips. How's that? 3 top tips. So the main challenge is making more use of the data rather than just for value added. Top 3, go.
Oh, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. Speaking to a lot of schools over the years, being into schools when we used to go into schools, and webinars and everything these days, for me it's making sure you know what's there. A lot of workshops I've done over the years where if it's been like a whole school, a whole staff training session, the amount of times that I've been shown feedback on screen, you know, standardized score, student ability profiles, that it's the first time the majority of the audience have ever seen that level of report, does, you know, make me despair a little bit, because, you know, you think all of this data is there, you want to make the most of it all, you want to get value for money, and if you're only looking at one bit of feedback, you're not really getting value for the money that you're paying. And, you know, that's a huge thing. I think, you know, no matter what we buy, we want to get value for money out of it. So I think being aware of what's there, if there's a report that you think will be useful to form teachers, yearheads, whatever, as long as they have access to it. I mean, again, I'm well aware of the fact that you don't want to bombard everybody with a load of data, but if it's going to be useful data, you know, if it's going to be something that is going to help them, then if they can at least know that it's there and be able to request it, that will be a good thing, because I think they will find that baseline profile incredibly useful, being able to know that, yeah, you know, this student's maybe not quite as good as at that kind of question area. They might struggle with working quickly. They might struggle with working accurately. That's something that you would want to know about now. You know, you wouldn't want that to be a weakness that you don't have the chance to address. And when the students go into those final high stakes exams, where they are going to be put under time pressure, you know, they are going to have to be able to get through that subject exam in the allowed time, and without the things like that. On a presentation like this, I'm always trying to keep within the allowed time. That is a struggle. Trust me, that is a struggle. So, you know, being aware of that and being able to address that if it's needs, if you need to. Don't just look at the predictive data and not look at anything else. You know, predictive or value-added data, they're important, of course they are, but they're not the only thing that is there. You know, get the maximum value from the money that you're paying, and use the data that is there, and make sure that teachers within schools are aware that it's there as well, so that they are able to then request it. If they think it's going to be useful to them, if they think it's going to help them get the best out of their class, out of their students, then yeah, that is really what it's all about, and making sure that they can have access to that report. You know, they can all be printed off using Report Center these days. You can get them all PDFs. You know, it's not as if everybody has to have access to the secure website. They don't. You can create spreadsheets, you can create PDFs with that important information available. So those are the things that I say a lot whenever I'm talking to schools. You know, get the maximum benefit out of that data.
Yeah, thanks, David. I mean, from my point of view, I talk to many schools about this, and you always find that often a school will start their journey with us, or whichever assessment provider they use, and they bring us on to fulfill overcome a certain problem or provide a certain solution. And at the time, it might be as simple as target setting. We want some objective data to support target setting, and it might be as simple as that. And you'll find that the first year that they use this system, then that's exactly what they use it for, and they got what it said on the tin, and they achieved their objective. Over time, and the longer they use the data, and the more you delve into it, the more comprehensive the schools tend to integrate the data into all of the other bits of data that they've got. And I think I put this in the chat as well, around predictions. And yeah, being bright will get you so far, but there are so many other things that will go into the mix that will affect the student's final grade. You know, and that list is almost endless. So, but actually being able to try and attach our data to some of those other data sources that you might have, their attainment data, for example, the homework, has it been handed in, what scores they've got, their pastoral data, their behaviour in classroom. And so once you start building up a much richer picture, and schools actually, it's incredible the way some schools start to use some of the data when they start putting it together with their own, creates a very, very rich picture. And the way I would answer as well is, I know we've got limited time here, but please do visit our YouTube channel. On the YouTube channel, you'll find all of our previous webinars, where you'll actually find a number of senior leaders that talk you through exactly how they use some of the data and how they engage both staff and students, as well as parents, in the use of that data as well. So please do head over to YouTube. If you can't find it, drop one of us a line or get in touch with us here at Chem. Everybody knows where to find us. It's chem@cambridge.org. It's a dead easy one. So please do fire us a question. If I've not covered it in the chat, if I've not covered it here, or if we've simply not had time to get around to it, I just want to say thank you all very much for coming. I want to thank David. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to come and talk to us on this webinar. And just a couple of things. Recordings will be sent out, so links to the recordings will be sent out after the webinar. If you have colleagues that weren't able to make it, then obviously, and they've registered, they'll get the link as well, so they'll get a recording of the webinar. And as with most webinars, eventually it'll find its way online, and so you will be able to view it again, probably on the YouTube channel. But the last thing I would like to say is thank you very much for coming along, taking time out of your day to listen to David and I today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and with that, I just wish you the very best end of the day for you. Take care.